This morning I'm talking about entering an ashram. Some of the talk may be a little abstract. It's a good word, maybe a little abstract. In other words, you may not know anything about it, you may not have heard about it, you may not have studied about it. And to me that's a good thing, because we're not here to regurgitate what we already know, but to learn new things. And in learning new things, if we really think about it, and we contemplate what we are hearing afterwards, slowly, it's like the light within us begins to expand. And that expansion causes expansion of consciousness. And that expansion of consciousness can eventually let us enter into the ashram. So if you're listening to this on YouTube or by our webinar this morning, don't write to me and say, well, I don't really understand what you said, because I'll just respond and say, that's great. So let's get started. So the last few weeks, the last few Sundays, I've been talking about ashrams, and I wanted to do a little review this morning for all of us, and that will let us then move into what I'm going to be talking about, which is entering an ashram. So this is what we've learned the last few Sundays, is that an ashram is understood as a center of retreat. When I was putting this together, I was thinking, this is evolution. Because it used to be a retreat was going to the Himalayan mountains, freezing, and living in a cave. So we moved ahead from that. And now we're understanding through the process of the expansion of humanity, and most specifically, aspirants and disciples, now we're trying to find our ashram. We found ourselves, but now we want to find our ashram. So we've moved from the isolated individual into wanting to find our co-workers, those who have dedicated themselves, not just in this incarnation, but our future incarnations, to the service of humanity. So an ashram is understood as a center of retreat where we can come together as souls. It is spiritual in nature. This kind of an ashram is spiritual in nature, which means it's not necessarily a community, within the town that you live. It's like I just received a quick text message this morning about how Arizona is filled with communities. And to me, that's a blessing. When you go into New York City and stay there for a while, it's not a community. It's everyone's out for themselves, generally speaking. So finding communities and to live in communities is wonderful, but this is different. An ashram is a community, but it's a spiritual community, and you have to prepare yourselves to be part of an ashram. So an ashram is spiritual in nature, and it's designed to give us direction in life. If it has a physical location, it will be found in a sacred location. And the sacred location, typically, even though it's harder these days to find, has minimal pollution, and most frequently is found in an area where there are mountains and forestry. If you remember, I said a couple of weeks ago that most disciples have a vague sense of who they are, a vague sense of their life direction. And this is a good thing, because this vague sense it's like it stimulates a desire within that person to find their life purpose, to have a sense of direction. So it's a restlessness, this vague sense of their life direction and who they are creates a restlessness. And this restlessness then pulls them to a magnetic center, and that magnetic center is the ashram. And the ashram is an outpost of the various ashrams of the masters. The ashram and its activities will in time help the people, the souls, the individuals to fully define themselves. So they've come into an ashram having a vague sense of who they are, needing a sense of direction, which their restlessness that pulls them magnetically into that ashram, that outpost ashram. What's so beautiful is when, and I've certainly experienced this myself, is when you enter into a true, authentic, beautiful ashram. In the beginning days and weeks and months and years, it's difficult because it requires an adjustment. It's perhaps can be compared to when you go from your native country and you travel internationally and you go to other countries where they don't speak the same language. Their culture is very, very different. The weather is different. The altitude is different. And you're struggling. You're really struggling to adapt and adjust. So that's just physically. When you enter an ashram, the adjustment is physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So there's 4 levels of adjustments, energetic adjustments that we're required to make. And when this happens, it helps us to define our life direction. It puts us on a path where we flower into becoming the greater self, and we begin to engage in humanitarian service. So that is like we could see this as a stepping off point in this incarnation, where the life of our soul becomes extremely beautiful, purposeful. It is now awake, and we begin to see life very differently from the person who is still struggling to survive, struggling to make a living, struggling to deal with the next door neighbor, trying to deal with all the pressures that life increasingly gives us. It doesn't mean that we don't experience these things. What it means is they are no longer serving a purpose to our growth. We are just recognizing this is part of life, but it's not the life. So when the disciple enters into an ashram, their consciousness is met with revelation. And through the experience of these different levels of shocks, we become affected by intense, fiery light. And this intense, fiery light creates revelations, or shocks, which then we begin to recognize the real condition of life. It is quite amazing. And where what I'm saying now for some of us, YouTube listeners, webinar listeners, is exciting and these are interesting words. It takes on a whole different hue when you experience it. So I'm speaking from experiences that you're going to want to have in your life as well if you haven't yet experienced it. So some people see these experiences as some kind of form of punishment, and even though it's something they've been striving for, they've been reading about, they want to have it, the minute they walk into it, they walk out of it. It's so interesting to watch. But this is not a punishment. These revelations, these shocks are not punishments. By keeping in closer contact, not walking away. It's like, oh, I'm interrupting myself. That's okay. Every once in a while, I like to listen to Joel Osteen. You know, he is a charismatic, self-professed minister who took on the job of his father when his father passed on. And every once in a while, I like to listen to his talks because he's very inspirational. And I like to see, I mean, he attracts thousands of people. You know, they have 2 or 3 services, of which 10,000 people each service attend. So that tells you there's a need, you know, out there. And in this particular service talk, he was talking about staying in the game of life. And this is so true. It's like some people, when their game of life becomes difficult, they walk out the front door or the back door, and they retreat, and they go into some kind of a depression, feel life is not treated them fairly, and so on and so forth. But he gave story after story after story of people who did not leave the game. Instead of running out the door, they ran closer, you know, to the center. And that's what discipleship is all about, because we recognize we are going to be tested. These tests are the result of many, many, many incarnations of the soul, and the soul is now saying, I want to be tested, I want to pass these tests. So now my life direction becomes more about service, more about progressing, more about advancing into higher realms of consciousness. It's like, I'm not going to get through this talk, sorry. It's like many years ago I went to North Carolina to the Black Hills, and because there was an ashram there and of sorts, and I really, at that point I was just kind of wanting to meet other people along the way. And so as I was sitting listening to the founder of that group, and he was sharing some kind of weird experiences actually, but I really resonated with it, and I realized as he was talking, you know, where this planet is now, as beautiful as it is, where humanity was then, is hell. It's not heaven. It's not being in the purity and the light and the love and the beauty that our great ones bring back into the planet and tell us about. It's not like the paintings of Nicholas Rourke, because this is heaven. This is beauty. This is what we are striving to become. It's not going to Walmart and Target and Safeway, where you bump into people, and as you know with the news yesterday and today, we've had 2 more mass shootings in this country. You know, this is hell. We don't want to keep coming back into and going through like the Groundhog Day, you know, of over and over and over again, this hell. So that's what I learned from this kind of interesting guy, you know, in North Carolina many, many years ago, and it's always stayed with me. So I knew at that point, this living in this planet has other reasons other than, you know, trying to keep your bank account from being under-deposited, and the stress of raising kids, and, you know, the stress of making a living and not losing your job. It's more than that. And so this is why we now need an ashram. Ashrams all over the world, more than ever, so we don't lose our sense of direction. So coming in contact with an ashram, a person can purify their life, making it really creative so we can cross into the next level of consciousness, into a more lighted consciousness where people like the Rourkes live. Nicholas Rourke, you cannot go into Walmart and be inspired. Truly, think of it. I go into Walmart and I think, oh my God, I'm going to have to take my cane. This is the biggest store in the world to get through. This is not inspirational. This is inspiration. And thank God for people like the Rourkes and others that tell us this is what life can be for us. So to cross over into this next level means we have to pass through this ring past not, which I talked about before, so I won't go into that. So to cross this bridge is very difficult. It's tough. We know that. We experience this. To cross this bridge is very difficult because we are limited by our physical, emotional, and mental experiences and circumstances, and it's important that we don't let these circumstances control our lives. Because this is not why we are here. We don't want our present circumstances, our level, even our level of consciousness or awareness to be limited by our beliefs or even our disbeliefs, even our traditions and religions. We cannot cross this canal of life because of our limitations and obstacles. So we're trying to cross this canal, cross this bridge, and it's going to be tough. It becomes a challenge, and we love challenges. When the bridge is crossed, this is when a person undergoes a new birth. A new birth is a term that's used in the New Testament. A new birth. Okay, meditation. We're moving on now. Meditation is the first step to cross the bridge and contact the ashram. An important step in meditation and contacting the ashram is a period of intense silence, otherwise called interlude. So this is very important if you are a meditator to recognize this is the next and the next and the next stage of the process that meditation and the unfoldment of meditation brings to you, brings to your consciousness. Interlude. And this interlude includes two parts, two stages. So the first stage, the first interlude is called contemplation. This is not Thomas Merton's contemplation. This is a very different interpretation or definition or activity of what contemplation means in the ageless wisdom. So the first interlude of meditation is contemplation, which is an advanced stage of meditation. Contemplation can be defined as an interlude between two activities. This is why we say it is a period of intense silence. So this interlude, two steps to this interlude, but this first step, this particular interlude, is an interlude between two activities, which means intense silence. Okay? You got it? Okay. This period of silence asks the meditator to make an alignment between their soul, their higher mind, and their brain. An alignment between their soul, their higher mind, and their brain. This is an alignment process. Soul, higher mind, and brain. This is the first aspect of the interlude. So it's during that alignment where you're going to experience intense silence. You have quieted the emotional body, you've achieved concentration, and a meditation which is going to allow you to focus and reorientate your consciousness upon a new world. You're no longer in the concrete mind. You're no longer fluctuating between the lower levels of the mental body. Now you've created this interlude because of your focus, this intense time of silence. And so you're in this interlude between 2 points, the lower and the higher. Focus, you're focusing and reorienting your consciousness in a new world. A new world. How many of you can keep intense silence in your meditation? I bet you're not many. But you can. That's a goal. So at this point, we are placing our consciousness within a sphere of influence of the higher self. Now the light, the love, the power of the higher self, the spiritual chalice, the lotus, it is now permeating and flooding your entire being in that interlude. At this point of success in meditation, you slip out of your personality vehicles and your consciousness becomes changed and charged with the activity of the higher mind. It is here, from the viewpoint of the personality, an interlude takes place. It is at this first interlude there is a point of inspired waiting. Inspired waiting. The activity of your personality mechanism is entirely quiet, entirely inactive. Your mind is held steady in the light and the soul. And in the meantime, you are thinking in unison with all souls. It's at this intense silence time of the first stage of the interlude is where you can be impressed by the planetary logos. That's just a little side note. Thinking in unison with all souls that are in contact with hierarchy, all souls in contact with the planetary logos, all souls in contact with the ashram of the master. And now you will find yourself tapping the resources of the ashram. Then this interlude comes to an end. You don't want it to come to an end, but it must. So this interlude comes to an end, and your waiting mind again becomes active. Since it is now rightly oriented, your mind is rightly oriented because it is now functioning in the light, love, and power of the higher mind. Now, your mind is becoming the interpreter and instrument of the higher mind. Let's just say you're becoming an interpreter now of what's going on in the higher mind. And when I say again, going on in the higher mind, it's because you're functioning with all souls who are in that sphere of consciousness, of the ashram of the master, the ashram of hierarchy, the ashram of Sonic Kumar. And now you're becoming an interpreter and an instrument of all that is going on there. An instrument of and an interpreter of. And now you begin to work out how you're going to bring what you are realizing into some kind of form, into some kind of manifestation. Your emotional nature is swept by desire at this point to make the plans objective, where your reoriented mind seeks to color the experience. And subsequently, your brain receives the impression, and the physical plane life is now your physical life, your physical plane life now is adjusted so all of these plans can properly come into some form of manifestation. This is why from 1 year to the next, to the next, to the next, after you walk into this ashram, your life changes. And you're trying to, maybe we could say it's like a ray 4 experience for a while, ray 4 being the ray of harmony through discord. We have to go through these discordant hallways because we planted all this discord there for various incarnations, and now we're trying to neutralize it so that we can bring harmony to harmony, the music of the spheres, the music of our soul, into incarnation. This is why these great ones, I keep pointing to the Mother of the World and Saint Sergius. See, they become our points of inspiration. They never lost contact with humanity. The Rorks never lost contact. They didn't, even though they lived, on the outskirts of the Himalayan mountains, and they certainly traveled up and down those thousands of feet of altitude, they never lost contact with humanity. They didn't go into those caves and meditate for their whole life. Thank heavens. So they brought their inspiration from Sanakamara, from the ashrams, into manifestation for us. So back to meditation, where this kind of meditative process used to be considered rare. It's not rare. It's not so rare any longer. Many disciples are now engaged in these levels of meditation because they're starting with concentration. It's the first step. The next step is meditation. And then the next step is contemplation. And so what I'm sharing with you this morning are the two interludes of contemplation. The disciple who is seeking to enter the ashram and cooperate with the hierarchy of masters, and to manifest this cooperation by active participation in their work here on this plane, this physical plane. So we must learn how to work not only through contemplation, but with the interludes, which allows us to have a shifting in consciousness. So to simplify, this means that we as meditators who wish to enter into the ashram or into the group mind must become adept at holding our minds steady in the light, receptive to higher impression. And our brain must also be receptive and able to hold the impressions coming from the mind. This is all done in meditation. When you're successful, your soul and personality become fused, and your consciousness has entered into the sphere of the ashram, stepped into the sphere of the ashram and the group mind. There's another step with meditation, which if you want to enter into the sphere of the ashram and the group mind, is building a cave. The construction of the cave asks you to become an integrated personality. That your personality is now controlled by the soul, and you are merging with the light of the higher self. Perhaps the most important part of constructing this cave is your intent. Your intent. You must have an intent to change your life, no matter where you are right now. Even if you think you're really, really advanced, you know, your intent must still be to change your life. To undergo the process of transformation. Transformation occurs in every single subjective level of consciousness. Every single subjective level. We undergo transformation. Our intent is to undergo transformation of who we are now. And to engage in different service projects and tasks in cooperation with the hierarchy. The cave is in the center of the head. It has a particular location. When you place your awareness in the center of the head, not only in meditation, but also during your daily activities, when appropriate, you can use that placement to manifest some portion of activity going on in the ashram. Do you want me to? Okay. When you place your awareness in the center of the head, not only in meditation, but during certain experiences of your daily activities, you can use that placement to manifest some portion of activity going on in the ashram. This is continuity of consciousness. So you build this cave in your head where if there is an emergency, let's say, going on in the ashram, in the master's ashram, and the master is calling for help, and you are driving your car, you'll pull over to the side of the road. Or you're in a consultation with the President of the United States. You're not going to say, "Excuse me, I have to close my eyes." You'll be in conversation. You will be receptive. Now, this is what happens with expansion of consciousness. We can be in two places at one time. That's what that means. And we won't miss a beat. We will hear and respond while we are talking some stupid talk, you know. Here on this planet. So when, especially in the beginning years, you place your consciousness in the cave or in the center of the head, you are going to hold it there. And in holding it there, you're producing a magnetic field of tension. And you proceed as if you were actually holding a cave focus, aligning with the ashram, and thus using divine energy. When your consciousness moves into the cave, you are now identified not only with your higher self, the higher mind, but also with the energy and activity of the ashram. When you contact the higher mental plane and intuitional plane ashrams through continuous meditation, so you see how meditation can be continuous. It's not just your 15 minutes with your meditation altar in the morning, but it becomes for these 24/7 state of meditation. Continuous meditation, your consciousness begins to pick up ideas and impressions from the ashram. So meditation is a key step in contacting the ashram. The next step is to engage in a life of labor which is dedicated to the upliftment of humanity. This is why we go to all the trouble, of making these Sunday talks available on YouTube. Our YouTube is, I don't really quite know how YouTube reaches out, to the internet, but I know we have subscribers, and we're averaging now between 50 and 60 people that watch, the Sunday talks. But those that are not subscribed also watch, and we're getting up to 4,000 and 5,000 viewers, individual viewers watching these Sunday talks. This is our way, one of the ways of allowing for the upliftment of humanity, to inspire humanity about the future. As we become more and more involved in meditation, study, and service, and aligned to the vision of ashramic activity, certain guides will eventually come and take you to the ashram to learn more so that you can work more effectively. This ashramic contact comes through your dreams. A very basic understanding of entering the ashram is, if you are not, this is so simple, it's so basic, it's almost shocking. You even have to talk about it. If you are not practicing right human relationships, then you're not entering into the sphere of the ashram with humility. You must be in right human relations with everybody in your life. And that is why we emphasize humility in this group. There's no room for ego and vanity. That pushes humility away. Humility is knowing who you are and who you are not. We're not imitators. If we do not have humility, we will not be invited into the ashram. We must be creating group thought forms of beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom, and protecting these thoughts, projecting these thoughts out into space. These thoughts must be part of the makeup of not only your daily speech, but of your personal thoughts as well. And there's no exception. Darn. It's sometimes like, I cannot think beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom in this environment. With politics, with who. But, there's no exception, so figure it out. These thoughts, beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom, must be part of our makeup in our day-to-day talk and in our thoughts. If we want to enter the ashram, we must have a credit card in our hand. Our credit is how many people we have sincerely helped. This is the second point. Right human relations and a credit card. The credit card is filled with how many people we have sincerely helped. We must save ourselves first, prepare ourselves, and make ourselves beautiful, but this is not enough. We are going to find people and pull them out of their hypocrisy, out of showing off, out of their vanity, ego, glamours and illusions, and so forth. So the whole path is self-perfectment. Here's a simple example. If you are given an article to edit, it is not the article that is important, but your perfection in editing that is important. For those of you who read Agni quarterly, or the books we are presently publishing, you will see a level of progressing perfection from our editors. And now we have we've added 2 new people to our editing team, and they're having to learn the Chicago Manual of Style. If you've ever read that, it's like an 8-point type, and there's about 1,500 pages to the book, and they're learning it as they are editing a really, really tough job. And I won't go into it, but they're already, working hard, dedicating themselves to increase their level of perfection. also proofreaders, also the creative design of books. What's interesting to me is that they are all volunteers engaged in these service projects, dedicating many hours of their day-to-day lives. But you see, it's like the teaching says, our life now becomes task by task, not day by day. It's not how much we're being paid to work. It's how much talent we have to give back to the evolution of life. Service for the ashram, service for humanity, for hierarchy, humanity of course, but service to the ashram and hierarchy particularly. Imagine Master Moria saying, I need an increase in my salary. Really, it's like, oh, that's strange. Or Christ saying, I need a salary before I can bring Lazarus back to life again. Pay me more. So, with each article in Agni Yoga Quarterly, each page of the books we are translating, editing, and publishing, these beautiful men and women are perfecting their skills, and in doing so, strengthening the unity of the group work. And of course, it is the weekly and monthly donations which go toward paying, paying for the publications and more. Nonprofit means just that, non-profit. We work whether we have the money or not. So without knowing it, everyone is involved. The whole path is self-perfection. Tolerance is another element. The development of tolerance is important if you want to enter an ashram. A great sage says, by thy God, not by your mind. In Psalms, King David says that we are the sons of God, the children of God. To visit an ashram is quite an experience. It may be that while you are sitting in meditation, you will suddenly find yourself sitting with a venerable teacher who is talking in subjects beyond your imagination. There is a discussion and then beautiful otherworldly music and singing. For us, this is heaven. We must try to expand our consciousness and put our mind into a concentrated discipline. We can do this by taking, no, I'm not going to go through this, it's too much. We're almost out of time. I want to move on here. So tolerance and possessiveness. We must overcome possessiveness. Possessiveness of or from the Dark Ages. To enter an ashram, we need to surpass the limits of our personality consciousness. Move beyond our ring past knot. 99% of the time we are preoccupied with our body, our emotions, getting ready for dinner. What are we going to cook tomorrow? What restaurant am I going to go to? I catch myself with this, like, eating, and oh my God, I've got dinner. Where do I go? I know where I can order. This is the middle of doing something really important, like food. Oh, the reality of life. So the question we can ask ourselves is, what percentage of the time are we passing beyond that state of consciousness, the personality consciousness? Next, we must develop a sense of responsibility in order to gain entry into an ashram. If you don't have that sense of responsibility, if you're not responding to the needs of the environment, we don't have a sense of responsibility. That means we can't enter into the ashram. We need to be careful and harmless in thought, word, and action. This is what leads us toward our ashram. We must observe the effects of our thoughts, words, and actions on others by asking ourselves, if I do this, how will it affect other people? in years to come. Think about how some people that you know still talk about their high school life. Mom and dad, when they were back in high school, those teenage years that were so important. And here they are, 60 years old, and they're still talking about it. See? We must be aware of how our thoughts, words, and actions influence others, how it will influence them in years to come. If we say this, how will it be translated in my life? If I think this, what kind of impression or direction will I have? We must occupy ourselves with the essentials of spiritual living to penetrate into an ashram, whether we are working in our office, also with all of our relationships, and during daily life in general. We must be constantly occupied with what is the most essential, and that creates spiritual tension. In conclusion, it's most important to experience contact with the ashram. Perhaps you've had experiences while dreaming that you were at a lecture. This is an indication that you're becoming aware and making contact. You can also make contact and then it disappears from your memory. It is possible to be in the ashram sometimes, and though perhaps not a member of an ashramic group, the ashram that is, let's say, in the higher mental plane, we may not yet be a member there, but our teacher can take us there. If there's something important going on, our teacher, by magnetic energy, can collect us together so that we can enter the ashram for a moment. Sometimes a person, maybe it is yourself, whose consciousness is in the emotional plane, but you link yourself to the mental experience and then dream the experience. Usually you distort it a bit. You know, put your own flavor because you can't remember all the words in that sentence. But you're still linking there. So you're building that through that line of communication. You will contact the ashram and return so charged with ideas that they just pour out of you. So that's what it means to enter an ashram. Pretty magnificent, isn't it?